My art teacher, Ms. Henderson, made me eat modeling clay mixed with paint because she thought I was faking my sensory processing disorder, and the clay had lead-based pigments from the 1970s that poisoned me. But when she got 15 years in prison, her cellmate turned out to be my biological mother who'd experimented on herself while pregnant with me, causing the very disorder Ms. Henderson tried to disprove. And now, they're both trying to manipulate me from their cell with fake medical information and lawsuits. My art teacher made me consume modeling clay mixed with paint because she believed I was faking my documented sensory processing disorder. When I was 14, I had been diagnosed with severe sensory processing disorder, which meant certain textures could trigger full-body panic attacks and vomiting. Not the mild discomfort most people imagine, but the kind that sends you into complete neurological overload, where your brain literally cannot process the sensation and your body goes into emergency shutdown mode. My therapist had worked with me for years developing coping strategies, and the school had extensive documentation, including a detailed accommodation plan that specified I could use alternative materials during art projects. But Ms. Henderson was convinced that modern psychology was just enabling weakness in her students, and she took personal offense to any student who dared request modifications to her sacred curriculum. She would regularly announce to the class that back in her day, kids just dealt with things and didn't need special treatment for every little discomfort. During our sculpture unit, she insisted everyone work with a specific type of oil-based clay that had this horrific, sticky, gritty texture that immediately triggered my condition. When I politely requested to use the air-dry alternative that the occupational therapist had approved, she laughed in front of 30 students and declared that I was just being dramatic for attention. Several kids started recording on their phones as she walked over to my desk with a container of the wet clay mixed with acrylic paint that she'd been using for demonstrations. The mixture looked toxic, with swirls of cadmium red and Prussian blue bleeding through the gray base, and the smell alone made my skin crawl. "You're going to put this in your mouth and prove to everyone that there's nothing wrong with you," she commanded, holding a handful of the vile substance inches from my face. My best friend Sarah tried to intervene, saying this was assault, but Ms. Henderson threatened her with suspension for disrupting class. The other students sat frozen, some still filming, others looking away in horror. I knew I needed this credit to graduate on time, and switching to another elective mid-semester would destroy my carefully planned schedule. My hands trembled as I reached for the clay mixture, knowing what would happen, but feeling trapped by the power dynamic. The moment the substance touched my tongue, my entire nervous system went haywire. The texture was exactly what my brain couldn't process: gritty, slimy, chemical tasting, with chunks of dried paint that scraped against my teeth. Within seconds, I was convulsing on the floor, my body rejecting not just the clay, but everything in my stomach from lunch. The seizure-like movements weren't from the toxic materials, though those certainly didn't help, but from my nervous system completely short-circuiting. I heard screaming, chairs scraping, someone yelling to call the nurse, but Ms. Henderson just stood there, still holding the container, her face shifting from smug satisfaction to dawning horror. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later with my parents at my bedside and a detective taking statements. Turns out 3 students had live-streamed the entire incident, and it had gone viral with over 2 million views before the school district could issue takedown